Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Art Show, featuring Victoria Chick, a contemporary figurative artist and early 19th and 20th century print collector. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The World of Art with Victoria Chick. And today, Victoria is based in Silver City, New Mexico. That's where she's spearheading the creation of a fine art museum out there, which is so exciting. But today she is going to talk about the art of the giant sequoia, those massive, huge trees, the actual largest living organism by volume. And you can find these trees, the giant sequoias, in the Sierras in California. Yosemite National Park, Calaveras State Park, Sequoia National Park, Kings Canyon National Park. That region is the only place where you can see them these days, but they used to be all over the world, but through shift and change, that's what happens. So she's going to talk about how the art and an artist, Albert Bierstadt, one of the many who have painted that region, how they actually influenced our National Park Service and how the art of these beautiful natural spaces have helped in conservation and also really letting the rest of the world know how beautiful America is. So how are you doing, Victoria?
I'm doing great, Lisa. Thank you for asking. It's a beautiful day here in New Mexico.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I hear it's fall up in the sequoias. There's certain areas. So like the sequoia tree itself will not show fall colors other than that bark. That cinnamon bark is fantastically a beautiful fall color, right? But in the winter, they're even better to me because you have the snow with that, that rust cinnamon color on the bark, which, if I was an artist, I would want to paint that. I mean, because it's just so cool. It's kind of like it almost makes you hungry because it looks like cake. it's like cake,
Sequoia cake.
Hey, it sounds good to me. It sounds good to me. Yeah. But have you been to Sequoia National Park before?
You know what? I'm ashamed to say, although I lived in Southern California, I never made it to the sequoias. Although I did go to Kings Canyon and I've been to Yellowstone. But just didn't get into the right part to see that.
Kings Canyon is connected to Sequoia National Park. They're on the same road. So you've seen the giant sequoias then, that's
I guess I have.
Yeah.
I guess I have. But I'm sure many of your listeners have been there and know what we're talking about as far as size goes and the the impressiveness. I've only seen it through visual means, film and pictures. So I know that what I have seen because I'm seeing it at a small scale. I'm not getting the full value of or the full effect of seeing those giant trees.
Yeah, they're pretty impressive. I mean, it's you can't hug it with getting your arms anywhere near around it. But what blows my mind about these trees are their cones are these tiny. They fit in the palm of your hand. You could probably put 3 or 4 in the palm of your hand. They're that small.
Wow.
But, the sugar pine has these giant long ones. And when you're in there for the first time, you're going to think but it's not, and, so they're very fascinating to me because they create these big burls and so many animals survive off of them, woodpeckers. And then in the fall, like the dead tree trunks, all the bears scratch at them for grubs. And, but they are massive. They are related to the redwoods. They're part of the redwood, family. But the coastal redwoods are the tallest. The redwoods are the tallest. These are the largest by volume. So you might be able to 2 to 3 people hug a redwood, whereas the sequoia.
You can't do it. Yeah.
Well, if you had kids in a class, they say it's going to take over 20 people to circle. And, it just depends on the size.
That's a neat way to understand the size of them.
Yeah, the magnificence. I mean, it's humbling. And for artists to do, because, I've photographed them and filmed them, and it's easier to video them because then you get this, like, you're literally standing, you go from the base, which is a better way to do it than top down.
Sure.
You could do either one, but if you go from the base and film and try to keep steady because you're going to fall backwards. because sometimes you can't even
Oh
get to the
yeah,
top. And then
right.
they're hard to photograph because how do you get this magnificence into like, here's your little square on your, film or whatever,
Right, right,
so,
right.
well, good photographers know how to do all that stuff, but I can see where painters just were like, okay, this is kind of a challenge. Wouldn't you think? Is that part of it? The magnificence and the challenge of getting this huge, tree and forest into one painting.
Well, right, and it was, when you think of the early paintings, as and this problem still exists today for painters is that you you're faced with this subject that's overwhelming. And what the early painters did, Bierstadt being one of them, is that they didn't paint on site. They sketched, and
Okay.
they did watercolors. Just a small size, because for one thing, they were think of the early painters, how they ever got there, how they heard about it was an interesting story. But this is what they were working during the early 19th century, and that way
Mm.
before the trains were crossing the country. So in order to get to the Sequoias, to see them, they had to get on a ship and go around South America and come up, and they would land in San Francisco. So
Mm.
they had a tremendous journey before they ever got there, and then they would go overland on stagecoach to the area where the Sequoias were, and they would spend quite a bit of time there, camped, and just doing sketches. And they would take those sketches then back to the East Coast where they had their studios.
Mm.
Because Bierstadt was originally from working in more or less upstate New York, and he was part of the Hudson River School, if we remember that. And so
Mm.
he was used to painting outdoor scenes, but he had never encountered anything as massive as trying to depict the Sequoias. So he wound up doing, on the East Coast in his studio, he wound up doing these tremendous paintings, like that were like 9 feet high and 12 or 18 feet long, to
Wow.
try and express to people looking at it that how massive these Sequoias were. So he did a great job. His paintings are some of the more outstanding ones of that area.
It's funny
And
because,
they would, and then even though he was painting very early, he would, by the time then trains came into going all the way across the country, he was his fame had spread. So now there's tourists on the trains going to the West Coast from the East Coast,
you,
and
that's
his
amazing though.
paintings were instrumental in promoting the idea of a national park to the Congress. So I'm sure that eventually people would have realized, somebody would have realized it. But his paintings were ready. They were already ready to show Congress. So they had never been there, so they were astounded by his art
His
of
art is
Sequoia.
incredible. Because it's detailed,
Yeah.
but it's impressionistic at the same time. And it's so funny because I have a friend right now traveling throughout Europe who is
Mhm.
actually born and raised in the Sequoia region. And he's in some gallery, and I need to go look it up, but I just saw it. He's just putting some snapshots up on Facebook of where, they've been traveling through Belgium. I think they were in Brussels, Germany.
Right.
And he went to some art gallery, and out of the corner of my eye, which I just want to, I'm going to have to contact him because I wanted to shake him and say, what the photo that you have in your article about the art of the Sequoia, he saw in a gallery, that painting in a gallery in Europe. And I'm like, you didn't take the photo of the whole I'm like, what? He was just like, oh, look, I'm in this gallery. And I'm like, dude, that's Bierstadt. And now I recognize a Bierstadt painting anywhere from doing these shows with you. And everyone, just so you know, as always, the link to Victoria's articles and her website, everything, are in the episode notes of today's show. So check that out. And you can also go to nationalparktraveling.com. Just type in Art of Sequoia and you'll see her article with this. But, yeah, I mean, isn't that funny? Because he's from that region too. And I'm like,
yes,
dude. But this is, Bierstadt's amazing. And, here they are doing all this before the trains. And then, of course, we have to bring up trains. Apparently, this is a subtopic of every show now. But, the trains, helped, take artists and then bring people, later as travelers. But didn't he also, I mean, the arts like John Muir and him and artists helped develop even, go to Congress. John Muir was part of it to, designate Sequoia National Park. Kings Canyon at the time, which is connected, was General Grant National Park and is actually one of the first in our system. Yellowstone was the first, and these are one of the top 10. Yosemite, which is connected, and Victoria has an article on that too, connected from there. So, John Muir, I mean, I think everyone just thinks of John Muir and Yosemite, but John Muir went everywhere too. He was kind of a traveler.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he was. And there were a number of other people not as well recorded as John Muir, who worked to the same ends. There are a number of them. But one of the things that was happening at this time, besides artists going there, is that the fame of the Sequoias spread, and so you had a lot of botanists, you had a lot of scientists that were going to the area of the Sequoias, and they were gathering seeds, and they were taking them back to other countries. So there were sequoias planted and actually grew in Venezuela. There were sequoias in Scotland. There were sequoias in London. I think there's one, or maybe even in Bavaria. They didn't get of course they didn't get as tall because they had been planted more recently. So, but one of them in I think it's in Kew Gardens in England is 100. Well, when I did this article, when I was researching, it was 177 feet tall, which is pretty tall by our standards. Mm-hmm. However, it doesn't beat the ones in California that were over 300 feet tall. So,
wow.
plus the diameter, the huge diameter of them. So, but anyway, there was a lot in the early 19th century. There was a lot of activity, both in art and in science, regarding the sequoias.
See, I love that part of it too, because I think art and science go hand in hand, and I love scientific art too. It's like I've really got into it. I just interviewed a bug person. I totally went space on what they're called, but he's a professor of insects and etymologist.
Uh-huh.
So there it is.
Yeah,
but
etymology,
he connects insects and art together. And I was going back in my mind because you and I have done some things on that where there's different symbols of this and that, and it was fascinating. I mean, we wouldn't have silk, and he said even the wax from bees played a huge role in art. And so anyway, that's another rabbit hole. We always have these side notes, but his name is Barrett Klein, and I encourage you to look up his website, pupating.org, and you'll see art on there that involves bugs. It's really cool. But he also does things in museums, the natural history museums. He does the actual big diorama, not the dioramas, like if you see, like, he has one of a Siberian tiger, and that's the tiger, basically, the castings and all of that. So anyway, it's interesting. But I want to go back to the size of the sequoias, because that's what I was saying to you, how different it is to be able to do, right? And to show the size And what I looked at with Bierstadt's painting is that he put perspective in by having a deer, waterfalls, and mountains. And I'm going, okay, so because you can't just do a big tree without little ones or
You've got to
something
have some,
small in there.
yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to have a reference point that everybody recognizes. You're right, absolutely. So having a deer, most people know how big a deer is, and you put that next to it, or put a human being next to it. We understand just how huge it is.
Mm. Ooh, and the lighting in his
But
work. Didn't he do the lighting amazing? Sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I just remember. You've lived in England, so you
Mhm.
remember the Crystal Palace that was there. It was basically the first world, world art or world center kind of. Anyway, so they built this glass building that was supported by iron. Structure.
Hmm.
Anyway, so they this one guy that was having a booth there, say, he decided that he needed to have the bark from a sequoia to line his booth. So
Oh,
he got some guys from California to girdle a sequoia tree and ship him the bark. So that happened. Well, of course, the tree died after
yeah.
it struggled along for a little while, but it eventually died. And so it took. They decided to cut it down, and it was such a waste. But they cut it down, and it was, let's see. They took the first from the ground up. They
Hmm.
went up 33 feet to remove the bark. So it was a tremendous amount of bark. And there are engravings of this tree, and after it was girdled, and there are engravings of them cutting it down. And
Mm.
it took 5 men 22 days to cut through the
Wow.
trunk.
That's
And
horrible though.
oh yeah, I know it's like it's such a waste. But and the tree rings indicated that tree was 1,300 years old.
That's insane.
I
They,
know.
they,
Anyway, but anyway, it was. We think of it. I mean, how selfish and how stupid of them to do that. But anyway, that's what they did. That there afterwards they took this tree trunk, which is now, I mean, it's just this huge table kind of thing. Well, they had a dance on it, the community dance. There was enough space on that tree trunk
mm.
for them to have many dancers up there.
That's
So
insane. I mean,
I'm really
it's,
happy that this kind of vandalism doesn't take place anymore. Uh,
but it was a novelty back then, right? And it's still,
yeah,
we go into the Sequoias, in one park ranger friend, Dana, and she, I said to her, people just like stop their cars. Like you're driving up the mountain
right.
pass. If you go from Three Rivers, California, which is a gateway entrance to Sequoia National Park, you can get there from Kings Canyon too, but at this one gateway, you go up a mountain pass, by the way, which was created by Charles Young, who is our first African American superintendent of the National Park Service, acting
Okay.
superintendent for Sequoia National Park. They just renamed a tree for him. He was a brigadier and a general, and gave him his proper title. He was a Buffalo soldier.
Oh,
This
good.
man's background is it's just fascinating. But they had no superintendent, so he went in, and with one summer, he got everyone rallied together to create the mountain pass road that you actually take up into what is known as the giant forest. And so you
Hmm.
go from the foothills. So if you go in the spring, it's really fascinating. You'll see like the lupin and poppies in bloom. You can look on the right hand side to see the Sequoia River coming through. You'll go through Native American historic sites. There's a newspaper rock or they call it Hospital Rock, sorry, with, uh, paintings on there and everything, Native American, I don't want to say rock art, but petroglyphs. And then you go up
Mm-hmm.
and you're winding and you're seeing Tulare County below, which is America's breadbasket. This is, in the top 3 places in the world of agricultural production. Over 200 crops are grown there, not to mention dairy. It's a massive. And so you
Yeah.
wind your way up, and then all of a sudden, these massive trees greet you on all sides, like on the right-hand side and the left-hand side, and people literally stop their car. Like you have to be careful. So I was talking to her about it, and
Right.
she says, Lisa, it's called they're in awe. Like, and I forget the first
Yeah.
time because I think I did the same thing. I'm like, holy cow, because it's just so shocking. And then you go in, and when you hike among them, and there's bears, there's black, oh, the bears I love the bears. It's just this very humbling experience to do. So when you talk about the size and the vandalism, we still have vandalism today. In fact, we did a video recording of it was from someone from the Sequoia Parks Conservancy, Rebecca, and she took us on some guided trails, and we were talking about all the different bird species and all of this. And you can see where people went, and there's this giant burl on one of the sequoias, and they, of course, decided we're going to put our initials in there and start scratching on it. Well,
Yeah.
that does damage to the tree. The burl, that is actually a protective thing for a tree. There
Right.
are burl
Right.
thieves. I mean, parks have to protect the burls, like in the oaks, the oaks throughout
Yeah. Yeah.
California too. So saguaros are endangered. People shoot them. But this kind of vandalism at that time, I think, was a novelty. It's like when I say it's a novelty now too, because when you're in awe, it's like, wow, we have these. Um, but back then they didn't realize, like, now we don't have them as prolific as we did, especially after the fires. Fire does help them propagate, but not the
Right.
kind of fires we've been having lately that are burning so fast and extremely far hotter, that nothing can actually propagate. It just burns out and dies. The seeds, they just need that little bit of spark to make the seed pod open for them to propagate.
Right.
And the ash is good for the soil, but not now. So we're losing our sequoias drastically in a way. And I don't want to be a
Yeah.
negative person, but they're threatened species. Our coastal redwoods are doing better, and Save the Redwoods League is doing an amazing job. It's one of our oldest nonprofits in conservation work, over 100 years old, of saving them from like clear cutting logging and things like that in California. So they're pretty good because the redwoods are pretty healthy in an environment that's a little damper, right? Because of the coast, and they
Yeah.
get more rain in Northern California. But in the sequoias, those that dry heat in the summer, so wildfire, lightning strikes, and things like that happen.
Sure.
So the vandalism thing, they have an example of a tree being cut because they did start logging out there. And I think that's in
Yes.
Kings Canyon. And then the Park Service started clearing areas to put cabins in so people could be amongst the woods. And then one day someone was like, dude, that's dumb. Like, why are we cutting the trees down for people to be among the trees, So they stopped
Yes.
that. So conservation is just, it's been trial and error
Right.
and learning. And I think even when they had that big one in the Crystal Palace that you're talking about, it's vandalism and everything, but at the same time, it did do some good in some way. I hate to say it. It's like, I'm not a
Yeah.
fan of zoos, but some people need the zoos, So
Well, that's true.
it's
That's true. I
it's
mean,
a double-sided
you
thing.
can, yeah. You could learn something positive from any of these situations.
I'm trying.
I still.
I'm stretching
Yeah,
it.
I know. I
But
know.
the art does so much better.
And there are zoos and there are zoos, and I mean, you've got a zoo. I remember when I was growing up, the zoo that was considered the ultimate zoo was Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, and that was where Marlon Perkins, and there was a program every week about that zoo, and it was interesting as a kid. But then you've got zoos like the San Diego Zoo, which is good. But even better is the San Diego, I don't know what it's called now. It used to be called Wild Animal Park,
Yeah,
where
the safari park.
they're
Yeah.
yeah. So that's they're trying to give more space, trying to recreate a more natural habitat. So so they
Yeah.
have the health and the welfare of the animals in mind. At the same time, they are captive, and you can't get around that.
More of the zoos and aquariums and things that we talk to now are leaning more
Yeah,
towards being hospitals, emergency rescue, helping
yeah,
natives,
yes,
native
yeah.
animals, indigenous animals, and doing a little bit
Reproduction
better.
is it?
Yeah, it's getting out of like, the Shamu thing and all of that and
Yeah,
using animals
yeah,
for an entertainment. So I think, and there's a lot of species that they're helping to not lose endangered species. There's programs
yeah.
like the Condor program wouldn't be without the San Diego Zoo, the LA Zoo. I mean, the zoos are
Right.
helping in those terms in so many ways. So
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. It's that
And
fine
what?
line. But I want to go with this. The reality is they didn't need to do that at the Crystal Palace because the art didn't hurt anybody, right? Or didn't hurt any trees. The art,
Right.
and
Right.
that transcends, as we always talk, art can go everywhere, especially now. And back then it was like, here's your painting, right? But now we have the ability to see these same paintings everywhere and get that perspective. And if you never get to the park, you still have that perspective. There's a
Right.
movement of, because our parks are getting overrun and it started after COVID, people started to actually go more to their parks. And there's a thing of, we talk about Love Your Parks. That's our tour name, Love Your Parks Tour. But we can't overlove our parks that we destroy our parks. So a lot of parks are putting reservation systems in because you want to go to a beautiful place like Rocky Mountain National Park or Sequoia National Park and be in a traffic jam. That is not good for the park. All the fumes of
Right.
the cars. It's not good for the park and it's not good for the people. It sucks being in a traffic jam. And that's the last thing you think of when you go to nature, right? So
Right. Right.
there's reservation systems that have to be in place now. So they're trying to do things, the Park Service and nonprofits that support the parks, to bring the parks outside of the parks so that there's programs for kids in schools. Art is a massive part of it. And artists that go in now, like with the National Parks Arts Foundation, you've been on the shows with Tanya Ortega, the founder, they're able to take, they go to places that the general public aren't always able to because they get special permits to do so. They are backed by rangers who take them there or things like that, get into the archives. And then they are able to interpret the stories of the park through paintings, poetry, dance, and music, all of it, books, even movies, so that the general populace can connect with that park. So that's why I think
Yep.
the arts are so crucial, whether we're talking about the sequoias, we're talking about, maybe a specific bird like the condor, because how many people are going to be able to go to Pinnacles National Park and do the hike to the volcans at the top where you get to see them if you're lucky? You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
So I think art I think is crucial, Victoria, for the parks
Yes.
and to
Yes.
connect to the people,
Yes.
you know?
And there are so many types of art that can be done. I mean, we think of paintings, I guess, most
Hmm.
likely, but there's so much beyond painting. I can't believe I'm saying that because I'm a painter, but there are so many other mediums, so many other ways to um, interpret what is there. And I'm glad
Hmm.
I know that they're opening the art up more and more for different kinds of art, or different kinds of artisan work, like clay, for instance, or weaving is another one. Weaving with twigs, weaving with
Hmm.
pine needles. So there's all kinds of ways to interpret the parks
Hmm. No, no,
artistically. Artistically,
no, it's really true because, I've looked at all the, we interview so many artists and residents and they come out and I mean, one lady I recently interviewed, she's a cellist and a singer, songwriter, guitarist, all of it. And she went and played her cello to bats in Tucson when she went to do the Saguaro Park residency, and could take their sounds and record because she's really can hear because she's a musician, can really tune into these different sounds. And she did a recording with crickets and the crickets went to the beat that she created, and she went to layer the sound and it worked. This is so fascinating to me. It's like it's limitless of what artists can do. There's people that go in. I've interviewed a quilter who does quilt paintings, and so she does a quilt and a painting within the quilt. It's amazing what she does. So I mean, it's just, there's filmmakers, there's dancers who do film and composition and performances. We've interviewed a gentleman who went to Antarctica and listened to the ice melt and then went on the research ship he was on and made music according to the sound waves that they were capturing of the ice, because they're listening to the ice to see, because that gives them the scientific information that I don't understand. But they need those sound waves, and he was able to create according to that and has done symphonies on it. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So you can listen to a symphony and go, that's the sound of ice through music. There's the sounds of plants that one gentleman does, and he plays certain things, and you can see how plants move according to light, because they attach, like you listen to, not like a heartbeat, but a heartbeat of a plant, and you can create music off of it according to what's going on. It's pretty crazy, actually. I know that sounds wild, but I mean, there's one gentleman who goes in, Andy Jarima is a musician and recording artist, and he takes his recording stuff and he listens out in the wilderness, takes that and incorporates it into music. When he was in Hawaii, Volcanoes National Park, he went to the ocean and went under with an underwater mic and recorded a hermit crab having a fight with another crab, and could actually hear them do that, like their little, claws going clash, clash. So that's amazing, isn't it? To think how we can take art in all these different forms that you're talking about. But I think painting, sculpture, was more like true art form back in those days, versus like embroidery is more functional, whereas painting and sculpture that's real art, and then there's folk art. And then, so is that how it happens? Like now we can say, okay, all is art, but some of it came from functional uses.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of functional art, but I don't know that it's any less art. It's not trying. It may be functional art, like a pot. It's not trying to show us some esoteric, idea, but the shape of it, the color of it, the texture of it, it's all art. So I know that there's always a tendency to separate art, so that there's some art is thought of in a lesser way than some other art. But I really don't like to do that because true art will show up, will strike us by it kind of has a presence, is it, what a great pot, say what a great pot that is, because we can, it's so useful, it fits our hands, its function is obvious in a utilitarian way. So in other cultures, for instance, people are art is a more integral part of some cultures' lives. I mean, it's an integral part of our life, but we don't think of it that way. We think we see it when we go to a hardware store, we're going for hardware, and we're not going for beauty. Except that the way the hardware is designed is functional, and because it's functional, it's beautiful. It works. It fits our hand. It does the job that we intend for it to do. So whoever designed the first hammer, whoever designed the first chisel, was an artist.
Mm. Well, that's the truth. And then they create art from the chisel too. You go back to stoneworkers and,
Yeah,
all of
right.
that craftsmanship.
Yeah,
Well, I agree with you 100% because, you know, I consider something like you could have a design on a glass, right? And you're going to keep
yeah,
going back to that glass because if you look at it, it may make you happy or bring a memory of a place you've been. Like you look at people going into, like Sequoia National Park, they'll buy a t-shirt inside the gift shop or, some kind of souvenir, which is all going to be some kind of design, whether, you can call it art or
right,
illustration, you know, but it brings you memories and it hits you in some spot that you were
right,
inspired to purchase
right,
it, whatever that design was. Some
right.
people always just buy a keychain or whatever, but you're going to have a choice of that. I mean, that's what I loved
Yeah,
about postcards too. Like it was some kind of, oh, that's the one I want to send because
yes,
that represents an experience, right? So I look at it,
exactly. Yeah.
gift cards, thank you cards. You always want to have this, oh, that appeals to me in some way, makes me feel something, cartoons or illustration art that we always talk about that are funny, the humor, um, and sarcasm is always welcome. So, I think it's just so, Nancy wants to do a thing with the sequoia trees because there's a lot with names. There's a Clara Barton tree, obviously the General Sherman, General Grant. Now we got the Charles Young one too, right? Which has been there. They just renamed it. And the General Grant, by the way, everyone, is our only living national memorial for armed forces. And every December, there's a trek up to the tree, and even in the snow. And the Chambers of Commerce all get together and work on this. And they do a dedication in December every year to those who have served our country, which I
Oh,
think is
that's nice.
it's amazing.
Yeah,
So
that's cool. Yeah.
yeah, and so they put wreaths there and everything. Um, but Nancy she wants to make a video where all the trees talk and say who they are. Like a kind of the
Yeah.
ghosts of the sequoias. Like
Yeah.
since,
Right.
Clara's got a tree, well then Clara wants to say who she is. How Nancy is. See, we went down a rabbit hole, but I brought us back to the trees. I did. But I,
You are really amazing. I'm thinking, how can we work sequoias back into this? And
I
there you
did.
go. You've
I
done it.
did.
You've done
I
it.
had to
Yes.
get, I had to get us there. But I do love this conversation about what is art because, you know, music is art. All of this is art. And when we look at the parks and the arts and the one thing, with what we've done with the National Parks Arts Foundation over the years is like everyone automatically expects us to use images of plein air painting. And I'm like, no, no, there's people
Yes.
doing
Yes.
comics. There's people doing, they've had a comedian there as a
Yeah.
comedian. So we've got to, and and comedian is good because, they went through volcanic eruptions and a lot of artists
Yes.
flock there because of they love the change of the scenery is always changing, though it's destruction, but it's creation. So artists
Sure.
love lava. They love it. They absolutely love it. They clamor for that residency just to experience that change. And it's dangerous and it does hurt people and neighborhoods and everything. So one of their comics artists, Andy Warner, has done like a whole book series, like a series of before, during, after, by getting to know the people in the area and stuff like that. So that's why I love
Right.
this conversation because the arts, it's everything. It's dance, there's,
Yep. Yep.
so, wow. So there it is, everyone. The art of the sequoia and the history of art. See, it's the world of art with Victoria Chick. We'll be back next month, and who knows what rabbit hole we'll go down there. But why should we stay on track? Art doesn't stay on track, otherwise it would all be conformed. Like it would all be like, coloring in the lines and the coloring pages, meditational, and
Yes, we don't
makes me
do.
have a good
Yeah.
time. But art doesn't do that. Art is a rebel spirit, right? I think all artists are rebels because they're like, no, this is what I feel I should do, and I'm going to stick with it.
Well,
So,
they see things differently. Artists tend to see things a little differently and point the way sometimes for lots of people to see things differently. So
and
not always, but it happens. So we're glad it happened in the case of the parks.
well,
Definitely.
that's why we say the art is always telling the history of a place too, right? People and places. And this definitely did this. And I just, I want to go see Albert Bierstadt's art in person. That's kind
Oh
of a
yeah.
goal for me now. I've fallen in love with his work. I really have. So yeah, this is cool. Thank you so much, Victoria. We'll talk soon. And who knows, we'll maybe go to
Okay.
another national park or who knows what we're going to talk about next. Thanks so
Well,
much.
I hope it's not a place where they're having a hurricane. So
No, we're done with that now. Thank you. I think the
okay.
world is done with any kind of storm. Can Mother
Yeah.
Nature calm down a little? Just,
Yeah.
let the planet, and that includes Europe going through floods and Mexico. I mean, there's just so much going on that, can we just have, a, a break, you know, a long
We need
one,
a break.
a long one.
Yes.
All right. Everyone stay tuned for
Oh,
our next show, which will be in November, third Saturday, as always. Thanks, Victoria.
oh, thank you, Lisa. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. You can view Victoria Chick's artwork at victoriachick.com. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.